Hi, this is Bob Hunter, author of Road to Wapatomica, a modern search for the Old Northwest. Today I am at Big Bottom Memorial Park on the east side of the Muskingum River in southern Ohio, the site of the famous Big Bottom Massacre. Big Bottom Massacre occurred on January 2nd, 1791. 12 settlers were killed, 5 were captured by a party of Wyandot and Delaware warriors. It's an interesting place, very quiet. Very seldom is there anybody here. Just like today, this is maybe the third or fourth time I've been here, and I've never seen anybody here in the park. Very beautiful spot. Very serene spot, and also a very disquieting spot, as you'll find out when you hear the story. The backstory for this event: in 1788, Rufus Putnam, Revolutionary War officer, and a bunch of settlers from the Ohio Company from Massachusetts settled in Marietta, 40 miles south of here on the Ohio River, where the Muskingum River comes into the Ohio. It was a very popular spot for a while. There were only 4 riverfront settlements on the Ohio between Pittsburgh and Louisville, which is a long way, hundreds and hundreds of miles, and Marietta was one of the 4. So first couple of years, I think there were, 45 settlers, maybe 54 settlers, one of those numbers, came with Putnam in 1788, or 137 settlers came that first year, 157, I believe, in the second year, 203 in the third year. At any rate, it was 22 months before this Big Bottom was settled, and the 36 settlers who came here were in Marietta. They found that all the choice riverfront bottomland there had been occupied, and they decided to strike out on their own and go north up the Muskingum River. They were discouraged from doing this by quite a few people there in Marietta because it wasn't safe. When Marietta was settled, one of the reasons the site was chosen, Fort Harmar had been built right across the Muskingum from the Marietta site in 1785. At the time that was settled, that was built, the idea was to try to keep settlers out of Ohio, because at that point the Indians had not agreed to allow settlers to come to Ohio, the Ohio country. But by 1788, there had been some treaties. It was okay. Fort Harmar was still there. It had soldiers. So the Marietta citizens felt somewhat safe because of that, and then they built their own fortification called Camp Martius there. So Marietta was safe, relatively safe for being hundreds and hundreds of miles from other settlements, major settlements. But the new settlers coming out there, of course, weren't finding what they wanted at there because they couldn't get the land that they wanted. So, as I said, 36 settlers came north on the Muskingum in the fall of 1790. They found this choice bottomland here along the Muskingum and said, okay, this is it. They planted stakes here and started building a blockhouse. They didn't get very far. They got some of the blockhouse done, and then they started losing interest in that and started building their own cabins. The cabins were here on this site. The blockhouse was here, was over there where that obelisk is. And then the weather turned really, really cold really early, and they started having problems. The river froze over, the clay froze, so they couldn't chink the cabins, so the logs in the cabins, had those gaps in them. They couldn't put the clay in them. But the settlers seemed okay. They seemed happy. Didn't seem to think there was any danger. Obviously, they were wrong. River froze completely over just before Christmas of that year. And on January 2nd, the settlers, the evening of the 2nd, they were in their cabins in the blockhouse eating dinner, and across the Muskingum over there, there was an Indian trail that ran from the mouth of the Muskingum at the Ohio down by Marietta all the way up to Sandusky, and that's where a party of Delaware and Wyandot warriors were coming down the trail, possibly to attack a settlement 12 miles south of here called Waterford, but they were surprised to see this little unguarded settlement and decided this would be an easy mark. So they came across the river, broke into two parties. One party went to the Choate cabin. The two Choate brothers lived there. They had two, Thomas Shaw and James Patton were living with them at the time because they hadn't gotten their cabins finished yet. Had time to build their cabins. So they were in there. The Indians, the smaller Indian party, kind of came through the door, greeted them happily, sat down at the table with them, and while the white settlers, while they were feeling pretty comfortable, the Indians captured them, tied them up and captured them. They were the lucky ones. They were four of the survivors. The other, on the site of the blockhouse, we had where the major event occurred. The Indians kind of burst through the door and started firing at the people in the blockhouse who were having dinner. The people in the blockhouse obviously didn't think there was anything to fear because all of their rifles were stacked up in the corner. Isaac Meek's wife grabbed an axe and plunged it into the shoulder of one of the attackers. She was immediately shot and killed. Isaac Meeks and his two kids were also killed. There were one John Stacy escaped through the window, climbed on the roof, trying to hide. The Indians, of course, found him up there. He pleaded for his life, and they killed him anyway. The two Bullard brothers lived in a cabin nearby, probably over maybe by the woods over there. They heard the shots. They grabbed their guns and they took off into the woods. The Indians didn't catch them, so they went 4 miles to the south, found a hunting camp, and told the people at the hunting camp what had happened. Then the hunting camp, the owner of the hunting camp, then sent out a party to Waterford and Wolf Creek, two little settlements down there, to let them know what had happened and to be on guard. So that was it. Here, the Indians collected all of the valuables, pulled up some of the wood floor, broke up some of the wooden tables and things, piled all this wood on top of the settlers' bodies, and burned the blockhouse. Unfortunately, the blockhouse was not. Some of the walls had been built with green wood, and it didn't burn very well. So when the searchers came the next day, they found kind of a macabre scene of a half-burned blockhouse with all these charred bodies in the middle. The searchers kind of cleared it and buried all the bodies right there where they found them in a kind of a mass grave. Where the blockhouse had stood, that's where this obelisk is right now. That's where we're standing right now, in the site of the blockhouse. And you can read some of the names now, because the sun. The names aren't always easy to read, but here's, killed: James Couch, William James, Joseph Clark, Isaac Meeks and his wife and 2 children. It's really hard to read without the sun. This side you can't read hardly at all. But kind of a disquieting place, even though it's a very beautiful place along the river. It's hard not to think about what happened here, stand here and realize how brutal that scene was, and how what terrible things had happened. But as I say, we're standing right on that spot right now, and it's interesting. There's the spot, maybe you can't tell from the video, but the spot is raised up, which I guess is an indication that they kind of buried this, buried the bodies and everything along with the charred remains of the blockhouse. So they got a little kind of a raised spot there. On the obelisk, if you could read it all, it lists 12 killed and 5 captured. Among the killed was Philip Stacy, who was John Stacy's 16-year-old brother. If you remember the guy who was killed on the top of the blockhouse. They found Stacy in the after they had killed the others, hiding under some bedding. And he pleaded for his life, and they decided to grant him his wish, and they took him with them. But he then died en route back to wherever the Indians were going. He died along the Maumee River of sickness, and so I guess that's why the people who put this obelisk up in 1905 probably couldn't decide whether he had been killed or captured or both, so they listed him with both. The other survivors, 4 of them, all eventually were freed. None of them, only one of them ever came back here, come back to this area. James Patton, if you remember, was in the cabin with the Choate brothers. He was a Revolutionary War soldier. He was 37 years old at the time of the attack, and the Ohio Company gave him 100 acres of property down by Belpre, near Marietta on the Ohio River. So he lived the rest of his life only 40 miles from here, but most never came back here. It was, as I say, a kind of a macabre scene, but it was also very historic. When the massacre here proved to be the start of 4 years, 3.5 years of war between the Indians and the whites that was finally settled with Anthony Wayne winning at the Battle of Fallen Timbers, and then at the Treaty of Greenville in 1795. So kind of a historic moment in history, not remembered very well here other than by this beautiful park. And as I say, it's like there are picnic tables here, but I'm not sure this is a place I really want to bring my kids and have a picnic. but it is, as I say, it is a beautiful place. It is an interesting piece of history, and if you do come this way, Stockport is about a mile up the road. Stockport is a nice small town that has a mill, a working mill where you can go and you can eat and see the working mill. But Stockport was founded in 1843, which was almost 50 years after this occurred here. This was, at the time this occurred, this was literally out in the middle of nowhere, and it seems that way now, even though, as I say, Stockport is up the road a mile. Thanks for watching this. I'd like to remind you, this is one of many stories I write about in more detail in The Road to Wapatomica, A Modern Search for the Old Northwest. It's available on all the popular internet sites, Amazon, Walmart, Target, Books A Million, Barnes & Noble, and also in some of your local bookstores. Or you can get it at bobhunter.net, where I will personally autograph the book and mail it to you. Thanks a lot. I'll see you next time.